The organisation is a reflection of the figurehead. The environment is going to be a reflection of me, but it's also going to be a reflection of all the people within it, because everyone has an impact on each other. You can't have professional rugby without the corporate element of it. And so we can't fight against that, but you have to learn how to do that. It doesn't have to be pretty to be effective. There's loads of different ways of doing it. I think that comes down to how you treat the individual and how you create confidence. But it also comes down to how the senior players interact with those younger players. You've got to let the bakers bake. You've got to give them as much runway as possible. I'll come back and say, we lost 10 lineouts. And she said, 2 patients died today. And it's like, well,
yeah,
we can get better at the lineouts. We always have a saying, like, sense of humour goes a long way. Rugby's pretty mental, and 30 games a year, and it's nuts, really.
Welcome to Coaching Culture, the podcast about cultivating culture and leadership. I'm Ben Herring, and I've been loving this side of the game for bloody ages. Today's guest is Phil Dowson. Phil is the DOR, the Director of Rugby of Northampton Saints. Now, as a player, he played 186 games for Saints, as well as 96 for Newcastle and 37 for Worcester. 262, the 7th highest amount of appearances in Premiership history. He also played 7 games for England, including 1 as captain. He started his coaching at Saints in 2017 and quickly rose the ranks to where he is now, to the Director of Rugby. He has had huge success here and leads a club that has been rapidly rising to finals across nearly every competition they are in. Along the way, his club has produced some of the world's finest talents, and Phil is right at the apex of it all. Phil, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Make me feel old.
Well, mate, you are certainly not old, and that's a great start point, mate. You are in an oldish role, but you're not old. 44 years old, Director of Rugby at one of the biggest clubs around. Walk us through that, mate. How is that? How's that little journey gone?
Yeah, I don't really know. I loved my time when I was playing there, and then I felt that there was time for a change. I went to Worcester for 2 years, which was incredibly healthy for me to get away and do something totally different. And Worcester is and was a great club. And I never had any. I didn't do any coaching outside of that really, but I did do some work experience in London. I did have a business, and the real world is hard work, and you realise that the commute is it's tough. And actually, I missed the coaching environment. I missed the challenge. I missed the week-to-week feedback of games. And I missed doing those sorts of things. So there's a guy called Dusty Hare, who's a Leicester legend, as you probably know. He's one of the leading point scorers for Tigers. He was working the academy at Northampton. He said, come and have a chat and a cup of tea and we'll talk about coaching. And I sort of went into that way. Jim Malander heard that I was coming to visit to watch a game and talk about it. And I transitioned into the academy role there and had to learn pretty quickly. And from then on, I've been very fortunate with Jim, with Chris Boyd, with other guys who've mentored me, and obviously a coaching group around me we've been pretty tight as well. So so it's they probably wanted me to be DOR to get me out of coaching and do a bit more management, and they can get on with it. But it's I love the club and I love what it stands for in the local community, and I'm enjoying what we're doing at the moment.
Yeah, I'm loving what you're doing at the moment. Do you think your background at the club helps you in your role at the moment? Do you think it really lends a helpful point of view?
I think in most ways it probably does. And I think particularly with the relationships, the head of performance is a guy called Tom Buller, who was my S&C coach. The head of medical was a physio that treated me and knew, how pathetic I was at times. And so I think we've got those very strong relationships from a different scenario that I can lean on, like you said, from an inexperienced point of view, from an age point of view. I can lean on some of those guys who've been in that environment a long time, who know me pretty well and hopefully can be pretty honest and open with me. And likewise, someone like Sam, obviously my relationship with Sam, we played under 16 against each other and with each other all the way through to this point. We've had shared birthday parties and all this sort of stuff. So we're tight and we can be pretty blunt with each other as well. And I think that having those relationships from previous was very beneficial. But I also think, like I mentioned to you pre-recording, that getting somebody from the outside as well, you don't want it to become the echo chamber. This is how we've always done it. I think you have to have that fresh view. So I think you got to be careful. It's not just the old guard coming through. You've got to have different ideas coming in, people from different environments who've also been successful, who can have some perspective and context to what we're doing at the Saints.
Yeah, I love that phrase you said, the echo chamber. And you actually said before, a quote from Boydie is, he said to you, Chris Boyd, you can't expect to learn new things if you don't let new people in. And
Yeah.
that's something that already, just chatting to a number of the staff at Northampton Saints, you guys are particularly good at, I think.
Yeah, and that was from Boydie because previously we maybe had a closed door, us against the world mentality, which I think there's power in that as well. Um, and I think there's certainly things you can build around that, and not letting people in, and it being a real sort of source of strength. But I think when Boydie came in, he welcomed everybody in. But he wanted his pound of flesh as well. He would ask questions. I had a mate who was coaching actually out in Perth, who was coaching the under-16s. And Boyd, at the end of the day, he let him into meetings, he watched training, and he grilled him. And he came out and he was like, "Oh, yeah, your mate needs to think about how he's coaching and this, that, and the other." And I was like, "Yeah, he's just doing it for, he's just trying to learn a little bit." But Boyd was at him and into him to say, "What do you think? How do you value it? What are the things that you would coach in different environments and stuff?" And so, so that's how he learned, and that's how he took things from other people and grew his coaching. And there's not many things that Boydie hasn't seen or done
Mm.
around the world. So yeah, so I thought that was really valuable. And Lee Radford took me into Wigan last year, which was huge for me to see that environment with Matt Peat. They went on to win the quadruple, and to see what they were doing was really eye-opening as well. So it's you going into other environments and you letting people into yours as well, knowing that everyone's talking about a very similar game.
Yeah. I love that phrase you just talked about, just like on that stuff, but the relationships and the ones you have with Sam Vesta, who you're coaching with, you're super tight mates beforehand going through it, but you're still able to be really blunt with each other. Like, that's an important part of like high performance sport, isn't it? Like, to be able to have those
Yeah,
direct conversations.
yeah, I think so. And I think it's the underlying. And we sometimes talk about it with the lads as well. They're really, we talk about how connected we are. That's one of the things that runs through our DNA. They're a tight group of lads. They've come to the academy together, which is a big structure for us and a big process for us. But you've also got to be able to feed back to them when you think it's not right. And I think Sam's more than happy to do that to anybody. And I can also challenge him and Radders in different ways, hopefully. And sometimes Sam will say, "That's not right. I disagree with you entirely." And other times he'll go away, reflect on it, and come back and say, I've thought about this, that, and the other. And um, I think that underlying friendship and underlying respect, I think, allows us to be pretty open around everything, really. And I think that goes across the coaching environment. And I think that one of the strengths we have as a club is how connected our coaching group is as a group of guys, how connected our playing group is, and also how those two groups interact as well. I think is important.
Mm.
Um, so it's not that sort of teacher-student principle, but it is much more collaborative, and I think that's one of the strengths of the group that we have.
It does feel like that. It does feel like you guys are, there's a nice mesh between the two groups, isn't there? Like some of the stuff that I've heard you guys do, like the entertainment side of stuff, the switch off stuff, is
Yeah,
the whole club together, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. No, and it has to be, and I think it's not a them and us, and it's not we're not preaching or lecturing. We're trying to coach, and I think there are some subtle differences.
It's not them and us. We're not preaching.
Oh, sometimes we are, but they're not. But we try not to.
That's nice, because in a lot of environments, it actually does become them and us, doesn't it? Like, that's quite an easy distinction to make.
Yeah, and I think it's very easy to fall into that trap, and that's why what you're doing and what you're passionate about with the coaching and the culture and how teams work and leadership is it's constantly evolving. People are constantly maturing, changing opinions, and environments sometimes do get stale, or there's all these sorts of different ideas come in, and so I think it's something you have to work at and have to monitor as well to make sure you're still doing that. And I think that's again goes back to what you bring in different people to who can take a pulse check on that as well. Who can say, you think you're doing this, but are you really? And I think that's always important too.
A pulse check. I love that. It's a cool phrase you talked about, that people are constantly maturing. When you have that sort of in your head, it changes your outlook on people a little bit, doesn't it? If you're open to that suggestion.
Yeah, and I think that probably comes from our age profile. I I want to I'll pick a figure, but I think it's changing this year slightly. But it was 70% generally over the last 3-4 years. 70% of our squad is to the academy. And so that means that 18-year-olds are coming to your environment the whole time. These 18-year-olds may have been at private school or boarding school, or may have never left home, or don't have driving licenses, or never had a girlfriend before, never been dumped. There's all these things going on, and actually that maturity thing. And that's one of the joys of it as well, is because now you're getting guys like George Furbank, Rory Hutchinson, Fraser Dingwall, who are getting married, who are, having children, who are, all these sorts of things. They're going through those life moments. So you get all this action on the pitch and then off the pitch, and sad things as well. Lads missing training for funerals and dealing with setbacks and injuries, and and that's part of it. You're a very close group and you spend a lot of time together, and so it's all in. You get the rugby, you get the injuries, you get the highs and lows, but you also get life as well. And I think that maturity thing is something that we think about, particularly Mark Hopley in our academy, who does an unbelievable job. I mean, he'd be good to chat to as well, because he obviously does it from a developmental point of view rather than a performance point of view. And the interaction between our academy and our senior group is obviously integral to get that flow through of players, talented players. But yeah, we've got to take into account that these lads, they're getting A-level results, then they're becoming professional rugby players, and then, you know what I mean? And then you look at Henry Pollock, then he's gone on a Lions tour, and it's like, there's a spike in that emotional roller coaster.
Yeah, then he's got the media coming at him for all sorts of things as well, right? Far out.
Which he loves. So won't worry too much about that.
You don't have to give him any pointers around how to deal with it? He's all over it?
No, yeah, my biggest concern is that he gets burnt and then he retracts and he's not being himself. That'll be my biggest issue is he, he says something, he does something that people really don't like, and the heat becomes a bit more visceral, it becomes a bit more personal. But at the moment, he's just running around playing rugby, having fun, and so I don't need to tell him how to do that. So
No.
yeah, my concern is that the media crushes him at some point and he goes into a shell, which would be sad because he is good for the game and he is what the game needs.
He's exactly right, mate. Yeah, you're right. And I love your outlook. He just, as a young man, he'll learn whatever he needs to learn along the way. Just let him have fun and play this game the way he's playing it, right?
Of course, that comes with guidance from people that he trusts. And that might be any of the coaches, it might be me, and it might be senior players who say, you maybe need to not do as much of this or do more of that, or he'll be guided. He's a bright lad, like he's not stupid and he's very driven to get to where he is at the moment. So it's not a case of not, again, it's that lecture thing. It's not somebody going to sit down and wag a finger at him and say don't do this, but I think he's more than willing to take advice.
Yeah, I love it. When would you step in, mate? Like your role is kind of that bigger overseeing role. When would you, not on that specific example, but when do you step and wade into something like that, which is not necessarily rugby, but will have an impact on rugby? What's the crux point for you?
I wouldn't wade in, but I'm probably a gobshite, which you'll learn from this podcast anyway. Talk to that. But I'd be more than willing. I'd share an opinion. And say, so I might say to Henry, he gets invited to do a lot of stuff because he's a man of the moment and he's charismatic and he's obviously, very talented. And I just said, you have to be really picky, because if you try and be all things to everybody, you're going to end up focusing more on the off-field stuff than the on-field stuff. And the on-field stuff is what, is the foundation of it. So I just said, be really picky. And I said about brands, attach your name to brands that are top level. So he knocked on my office door and came in and said, I've got a photo shoot with Burberry. I said, yeah, that's pretty good, man. You should probably do that. You know what I mean? Like he's getting lots of attention, and I think I just said, just make sure you're not cheapening that name by doing everything. Be a little bit more choosy about who you attach your brand to, which sounds a bit cheesy, but that's part of modern day, isn't it?
It very much is, and it's if you're approaching things from the way it might have been looked at 20 years ago, it's a very different way of approaching that side of things, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. But I think that's modern societies have changed its approach to so many different things, and I think it's going to be one of those things we can't. I sometimes get frustrated in rugby where you can't have professional rugby without the corporate element of it. And so we can't fight against that, but you have to learn how to do that, and then how to balance. It's always a balance, like everything in life and coaching and stuff, is you balance it up. Like if you spend every night at London Fashion Week and then expect to train well, then that's going to have an impact. If you have your day off at London Fashion Week and you leave it at a reasonable time, having had a good day and all that sort of stuff, and seen something different, then that's cool. there's a balance between what you need to do. And I think HP is probably learning that, and he's a bright lad, so he'll learn that very quickly.
Love it, mate. Love it. Well, all this stuff sort of feeds into the bigger question, mate, which is the wider setting and how it all affects it. But I want to ask you this question: how do you define culture?
I mean, so you sort of sent me that as a heads up, and I'd listened obviously to a couple of your podcasts with Eddie and Sam, and it's obviously very hard to nail that down in different things. But for sort of what I came up with, talking to my wife as well, who works as a lecturer at university and is part of a team, had worked in the NHS, and talking about teams within the NHS as well. And I said shared and agreed behaviours by everyone. So shared and agreed by everyone behaviours in a certain environment, and those behaviours have to be exhibited. It's not a set of rules, but it's yeah, I think behaviours is the way that I would try and define it.
How do
It's
you?
fairly
Yeah. How do you get agreement on some of these? Do you put it out there as a democracy?
to a degree, and I think it wouldn't necessarily everyone has an idea, but I think if you'd like to think that if people felt I was being too draconian or too much of a dictator, that somebody would say something, like Sam would say something. But you'd hope that at some point the players would go, that was maybe a bit tight on this, that, and the other. But fundamentally, despite the fact, contradictory to what I just said about the 18-year-olds coming to the environment, I treat them all as men.
Yep.
The responsibility. There's no curfew. There's no, we literally have one rule, and that is be on time, out of respect for everybody else's time. The biggest asset we have. So that is the one thing I would go after. And like if we start everything on time, the schedule will work, and we can get on with our lives, and we can get on. And if you're 2 minutes late for physio, you're not going to get the physio that you need for that half an hour block, or the physio is going to be late for the next guy, and that's not the right thing. So the only thing I'd go on is time, because I don't want to waste it. But everything else is pretty much open to interpretation, to be honest, and that's based on I trust the lads to make good decisions, and if they don't make good decisions, we work out how to deal with it.
Have you had to do many of those work things out afterwards?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, because 18-year-olds sometimes get it wrong. And I think being a dad,
Yep.
you were 18, 2-3 years ago. You probably know remember what it feels like.
Yep.
So people sometimes get it wrong, and I think that's why it's so important to understand the people you're bringing into the environment, and also understand how they react and what they need moving forward, and what the group sees as well in terms of how you deal with some of that stuff.
Do you look for the people to come into the environment which are going to work, or do you hope the environment shapes the people in such a way, or is it a bit of a balance on both?
Yeah, I'd say it's a balance. It's a great question. I mean, from a recruitment point of view, we obviously we want to recruit really good players. But you've also got to find people that you think will adapt and fit into the league, to the environment, to playing 30 games a year, to living in the Northern Hemisphere, to living in the Midlands, all these sorts of things. And it's character that you're trying to assess. And that's, really difficult to measure and assess in an interview. And lots of people, you try and do your due diligence around their background and talk to coaches that have worked with them. But again, you're relying on somebody else's opinion. So yeah, we definitely do a lot on the character piece, and we definitely, try and ask the right questions to draw that out of people. But it is difficult, and you don't really know. I spoke to Matt Pete about recruitment and how he recruits for character, and he said you ask as many questions as you possibly can, but you don't know until they walk in the door. And then they have a few pints together, and then you find out what they're like when they're not picked, or when they're injured, or when they have a game costing error. That's when you find out what sort of character they are. And generally, we've got a great group of lads. And I think the rest of the group, like you said, if you've got a really good leadership group, I think they do. I think people do conform to their environment in some way. Not entirely, but in some way they do.
Yeah, it's amazing, mate. You just said something there which I hadn't probably thought about, as recruitment in the English season, which is 30 plus games a year. That is actually a big thing you've got to look for, people that can actually go through that grind, isn't it? Like, it is a grind at times through that winter season.
Yeah, it's relentless. In the Super Rugby, I think it's 16 games, is it?
Yeah, it's half, yeah.
So something around that. Obviously, the Japanese season is very short. The French league is incredible because it's even longer, and then even pre-season, so the preparation time. So having an understanding of their robustness is obviously a big part of it because that, I mean, it's a bit of a trite thing to say, and we take the mick out of it, but the best ability is availability. You can be the best player in the world if you sat on the physio. So robustness is a big one for us as well. I think as well, the thing that I was really not blasé to, but ignorant of, was we had a player come over from New Zealand after the World Cup. And I said, "How are you settling in?" He said, "Yeah, it's good, but it's dark. It's really dark." And I said, "Oh, right. What do you mean?" And he said, "Oh, well, in the morning I turn up and it's dark. And in the evening when I go home after training, it's pretty much dark." And he's like, "I didn't expect it to be so dark." And I said, "It's not always like that." And he was like, "What?" I said, "In the summer, it's like light till 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night." And he's like, "Oh, right." And and he was going through the tough months of November, December, January, February, thinking, "Geez, these British guys are miserable because they never see the sunlight." And then I see him in a beer garden, in the countryside outside of Northampton, having a great time with his wife and kids, at 9 o'clock at night because the sun's out and he's having a good time. So he just didn't appreciate that. Actually, you probably could have given him, thinking, "Oh man, I've got another 4 months before I can go on holiday and see sunshine." But it was just around the corner. So yeah, just an appreciation of people coming from different parts of the world and having to settle in, and some of the elements that are going to impact them.
And that's what you talked about, that you don't necessarily know that stuff until they walk in the door and then they're living
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we found just my experience of Leicester exactly the same. I had guys like Craig Newby and Aaron Major with me, and just it did that specific example just to hit us a little bit, because it would leave training at 3 o'clock, it'd be dark, and so we'd have to stop in at the Kibworth pub just to every night, just because it felt like the right thing to do, which
Yeah,
probably isn't super good for professionalism, but
it's super good for your mindset, though.
it
I
had
saw
to be.
Newbs. Craig Newby came in. He's coaching Cambridge, so Newbs came in. We got some guys on loan at Cambridge, so Newbs came in, and we had a chat yesterday. He's a good man.
He's a top man. Got a lot of time for that man, the hunter extraordinaire. Now, mate,
Yeah.
you did talk about the local boy focus, and I know your club, with 70% of your guys coming through the academy, is that a bit of a culture piece that you've brought in, or has it always been there around Northampton that you want to have that local, breathe them through the academy and come up? Is that a massive part of culture?
Yeah, I think it is. There's two things really. Is one there's an absolute necessity for it from a squad build point of view. We're not a club that's got tons and tons of cash that can go and just sign whoever we want to sign. We've got to be quite careful and shrewd about who we bring into the environment. And so developing our own is clearly part of the business model, if you like.
Yep.
But probably far more importantly than that is interesting. I had a chat with Stuart Lancaster as well. He's unbelievably generous with his time to young coaches, and he'd sat down with all the Leinster players when he first got there, and he said, "When you're a kid growing up, which club did you want to play for?" And they all said Leinster. And he said that impact, that was incredibly powerful, because they're actually playing for a club that they'd supported as kids, that they'd seen win stuff, that they'd wanted to be part of that, and their dreams had always been in the blue shirt. And I think, Fraser Dingwall's a great example. He's a brilliant leader within our environment, a very good man. But I've got pictures of him sat in the stand at games, at knockout games in Europe, when there's lads playing, there's lads like me playing and James Craig playing and stuff. And so that flow through of understanding of what the club's all about is huge, I think, in our environment. So this is the club that they always wanted to play for, and they've dreamt of playing for. That's not to say they wouldn't go flat out for another club, obviously. And that's not to say that, that players coming in from different clubs are giving any less, but I do think it adds to some of the fabric of what we're trying to do.
How do you make a club, or how do you grow a place, so that the younger generation want to be there? Is it specific things you do to help?
Well, I mean, I don't know. That's not, to be honest, the club's been going since 1880, and we lean on that history plenty, with regard to those stories and those chapters, each season being a different chapter, and you get to write that chapter and create your own story. So I wouldn't have said that I would have had anything to do with growing the desire for those players to come and play for it. I think the fact it's been successful in the past, obviously, drives people. That's my local club. This is the club that my dad's taken me to watch. This is a club that I want to represent and also win stuff. So I think that's important. I spoke to Dean Ryan a lot about it when I went to Worcester. Is Worcester potentially didn't have that rich history in which to lean on, and he was trying to create it, and he was trying to build that storyline, from afresh, which again, like I said before, is not something I've had to do, but was an interesting conundrum for him to build that heritage, build those stories. This is who the club is, and this is why it's important for us to represent it in the right way and play well and work hard. All those sorts of elements that you want to build into it. You can do that when you've got this really rich history of club legends who do incredible stuff in a Saints shirt.
Yeah, well, you are one of those club legends, 186 games. That is you, whether you like to acknowledge that or not. That definitely brings rapport, respect, and a lot of kudos to what you do. And I think you probably underestimate your impact there, because whether you like or not, the next generation are looking up at this club legend, and the way you hold yourself, act, what your philosophies and beliefs around culture is largely what I would imagine a lot of those guys would just take up because you're doing it. So if you're leaning one way, there's a high probability that's where all those young players will look too, I think.
Yeah.
Would you sort of agree with that sentiment begrudgingly? Because I know you're not in the custom of...
Yeah. The one thing is, it's not about any sort of individual. But one of the sayings is that any organisation is a reflection of the figurehead in some ways. The attack is undoubtedly a reflection of Sam Vesti. Like, it has his fingerprints all over it. The defence is undeniably a reflection of Lee Radford and how he wants to defend. And so, yeah, the environment is going to be a reflection of me in some ways, but it's also going to be a reflection of all the people within it, because it's because it is so nebulous and it is so big that everyone has an impact on each other. Do you see what I mean? All those connections mean no. So yeah, and that's the joy of it, and that's the reason that you've got such a rich subject matter to dig into with coaches of all sports, is that it's so hard to define. It's different in every environment. Different people do it differently. And everything I'm saying is purely from my perspective. The key thing would be actually talk to an academy lad who came in this year and say, how did you find the integration into this environment? Talk to somebody who's been in it for 10 years and go sit with George Furlong as captain and say, you've come to the academy, you've played for England, have been unlucky with injuries, you've had good times, bad times, and everything in between. How do you find the environment? And I think that would be, it's hard to measure, but I'd love to know how that is perceived and how we could tweak that to be better.
I love that, mate. Any organisation is a representation of its figurehead. That's a great statement. And like, certainly in the way that the Saints play, young, free, passionate, and love with what they do, pretty much sums you up in a lot of ways too, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure my wife would agree with any of those.
Well, mate, she's not in it.
Yeah.
You just keep doing the chores for the rest of the day.
Yeah, and I'll do what I'm told. Exactly right.
It'll be fine.
Exactly right. Yeah, I think one of the things I think Sam's particularly good at, actually, probably a lot better than I am, is perspective and understanding what we're doing. And I think we try and always, we always have a saying, like, sense of humour goes a long way. Rugby's pretty mental, and 30 games a year, and it's nuts, really. And I think just to keep your feet on the ground, and after a loss, to make sure that, or a disappointment, or something that's not working quite well, is just to make sure that you have some context and some perspective, and you take a step back. Goes and you lose and you're upset. And that's something, but we don't want to dwell on that. We've got to take into, and that's why when my wife worked at the NHS during COVID, it was really healthy from my point of view, because I'll come back and say, we lost 10 lineouts, and she said, 2 patients died today, and it's like, well, we can get better at the lineouts, so let's not worry too much. And so when you're in it, you want to be fully in it, and you want to be fully immersed, and you want to go for it, and you want to be emotional about it. But when you're out of it, you got to step out of it, like you said, and switch off and understand what it is to change it for next time.
I think just listening to you and some of your aftermatch speeches, particularly some of those ones after heavy losses in recent history, like some heavy halftime change turnarounds, you're pretty composed and you're pretty balanced around what you say. Is that something you try to be? I've been really impressed, mate. Like, you're not a guy that dumps it on the players or say that's unacceptable and tears the guys publicly. Is that something you try avoid and keep that?
Yeah, I would never ever, never ever, I say that, but it would have to be a very, very extreme situation where I'd say anything publicly about one of the players, because I'm not sure it's necessary. And I don't think and although people can, and I know coaches do, and I know, I was listening to Wayne Bennett's book about his use of the media, and I know Eddie's obviously very shrewd in terms of how he uses the media to send messages and to get his point across. But that's not something I'm necessarily comfortable doing. I would do that personally if I felt that was necessary. But yeah, maybe that's a trick that I'm missing. And you say compose. Last season I lost my temper at halftime more than, and it's only effective. I think it's probably effective twice a season, and I lost it more than once last year at different times, just out of frustration, because I know how good the group can be, and we didn't find that consistency. And so the players, when you say, "Oh, Dowse, you're pretty composed," I think they might.
They go, come into the change room, have a listen to see if you think he's composed.
Yeah, talking absolute rubbish. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you have mentioned one thing. You've talked in a reference to Jekyll and Hyde moments, where with the team with a little bit up and down in some times, and so obviously highs and lows. How have you reflected, regrouped? How do you keep a consistent message for players and staff and fans around those sort of moments without detracting from anything you're trying to do bigger picture wise?
I think one of the things that I valued as a player from coaches that coached me was consistency, and I think that ability for the players to be themselves, they've got to know to a degree how you're going to respond and how you're going to react, and what you're going to be like each morning. And so I try and make sure that, and it's hard over a long season, there's obviously lots going on, but I try and be consistent in how I treat people and how I act and how I talk to them. So the consistency, I think, is something that I value and something that I try and exhibit. And then the rest of it is sort of, managing expectations with regards to the crowd and bits and pieces like that is just understanding what we can impact. We can impact our performance through our training. So fundamentally, everything comes back to training. And what the other thing that we can impact from a performance point of view is how we think about the game and our mindset. And that's why I spent a long time listening to a lot of different podcasts and doing loads of interviews and trying to do plenty of reading on getting a sports psychologist in, because it was something that I felt we were missing. It's something that's really hard to put into the environment. And so we talked to loads of different people from loads of different parts of the world in terms of that. And we found a guy called Ollie Dixon who, we've got guys who are really, really good from a physical point of view to get guys ready for rugby. We've got, some of the best technical coaches in the world. But fundamentally, as you know, and I'm sure it is how we think about the game, how we reflect on our errors and mistakes and the disasters. And like I said before, this young group, how do we then give them the accountability to make sure that we're getting better? And I think his impact on me and our messaging has been really marked as well. So I think having somebody with expertise, no shit, helps you deliver a more consistent message.
Well,
but he's been very good, and I think his ability to talk to the players from a really calm position, rather than me. Sometimes I start a meeting thinking I'm going to be really calm, and I start to get more and more emotional and involved. He can deliver that message throughout, and he does it very well. What's been the
big learning on that front for you? What's been one of the big good or bad things that someone like that's taught you as in your role?
I think it's very hard from a mindset point of view, to just have one simple solution to any of the problems, because everyone is thinking about the game differently and has different things that are happening all the time. And so just to turn around and say, we were hesitant because, or we were overconfident because some players in the environment were hesitant, no doubt. Some players were really overconfident in the same game. And so you put those things together as, how do we then actually as a group deliver a message that's relevant to both those groups, not knowing because no one wants to say, I was actually really nervous and I was scared to death of making a mistake. Players just don't want to say that. And a player's not going to go in and going, geez, I thought we were going to, after we scored 2 early tries, I thought we were going to kill them. They're not going to say that either. But you also need to say, listen, what's important? Well, it's the intensity of what we do and how we do it. And do we know what we're doing? did we go about it the right way? Did we prepare in the right way? And as a coaching group, did we give you the right tools moving into it? So I think it's not one size fits all, and there's different people on different journeys. There's guys who are trying to play for the British Lions in England, and there's guys who are trying to get their first Premiership start. And I think that's a tricky message sometimes, and I think that's probably what I've learned is not just tarring everyone the same brush and going, "We're so overconfident, you arrogant wankers." That's probably not the message.
Yeah.
And likewise, why are we not swinging for the fences and being bold in our play? That's probably not the message either. And so trying to make sure something, unlike this answer, there's something that's not too woolly and far reaching. You know what I mean? It's like trying to hit the nail on the head without missing it completely.
How do you avoid that sort of scattergun effect? Like just shooting everyone with the same bullet. How do you sort of sniper it down and make sure you're hitting the shots you want to hit? Is there any way to identify, like you talked about there, like you've got guys playing for England, you got guys making their debut. There's a big disparity on, their fear, their comfort levels, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Do you make any adjustments for that sort of stuff in your environments?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that comes down to how you treat the individual and how you create confidence. But it also comes down, and we're very good at this as well, in terms of how the senior players interact with those younger players and inexperienced players. So I think that's the playing group has a huge impact on that as well. So it's not like, my message, is probably lost in the wash. It's how he feels when Alex Mitchell and Finn Smith are talking to him on the wing. That's what's going to give him confidence. How he feels when Sam is coaching him, that's going to give him confidence as well as, standing up and saying one thing in a meeting, that may give an element of it, but that's certainly not the most important bit. So I think the way the individual feels and the way the individual is treated about the people throughout the environment, and that's what will potentially give them confidence and belief. So how people treat each other, I'd say, would be the one.
You say your players are very good at that sort of stuff. Your senior players are very good at that side of things. How's that come about? Is it just natural? It's a good bunch.
I think because Finn Smith is still only, I want to say, 22. Alex Mitchell is one of our senior guys, and he's 28, I think, 27, 28. So it's not like they're 35-year-old married, 2 kids, like you would walk into an environment and be like, "Oh man, that guy does not want to talk to me." They're still approachable, and they're still on the same level, and they're still talking about the same things outside of rugby. So I think that, and they've just been through it. They haven't forgotten about what it was like to make debuts and to make horrible errors in a game and to miss tackles that lead to a loss and all that sort of stuff. Or to score the winner. They know what that's like as well. And so, to keep people's feet on the floor and all that sort of stuff. So we try and put a big emphasis on how lads come into the environment, either from abroad, and it's not me saying you got to take him out for dinner or you got to do this, you got to make him feel special. But I said the sooner he feels like a Northampton Saint, the sooner he's going to play like one. And so how can you make him feel like one? Well, you find out about him. Sam does some great stuff with the backs around My Life in 5 Photos. You get their background, you get some stories, you get some understanding around their values, and some of their setbacks as well. Some of the things they've already had to deal with, where their resilience comes from. He's really good at that in smaller settings. And we do that through socializing and making sure that everyone feels part of it. Everyone has a role to play, obviously, and trying to make sure everyone knows what that role is and get stuck into it as quickly as possible.
Do you do that stuff as well? Because I know Sammy does that stuff. Do you do a little bit of that side of things in your role?
Yeah, we do. I actually handed it over to the players this year, but we have like sort of introductions to the players. So I would, it sounds a bit creepy, but when you're signing a player, I'd look at what they put out on social media, because that will tell you something about them as a person. And is he a family man? Is he into hunting? What are the things that he's interested in? Does he like, there's all those sorts of things. And so I would often see funny stuff, and I would do an introduction to the player and say, this guy's from Fiji, he's interested in this, he's got kids, and that then gives people, okay, he's got kids, maybe my kids can go, I can take him out to the soft play, on his day off, and show him at least where that is and stuff like that. So it gives you some background into what they're into. And then I'd also fundamentally take the piss. And I think, and just that ability to laugh at each other and all that sorts of thing. And then this year I handed it over to players. I said, you've got to choose somebody to introduce you. And so Robbie Smith, who's from Newcastle Falcons back in the day, introduced Callum Chick, and Johnny Munga, who played with Danilo Fischetti at London Irish, introduced Danilo, and obviously had some stories about him and had some background on him and stuff like that. And I think that introduction, that, everyone's willing to be laughed at. There's always some in jokes, um, is a sort of welcoming committee that I try and do. And then obviously it's easier in smaller groups. So Sam's really good at that, and Tram does James Craig does different things as well, to try and make sure that we're not just coaching code, but we're getting to know the lads as well. And then straight away you find, in Vino Veritas, we have a social pretty early on, and we find out who, the lads who said to me on the call that they don't, when I'm doing recruitment calls, they don't drink. And then the first social turns out they do.
Yeah.
And that's always interesting. So I think, sometimes just doing something social gives us a good impact and an insight into what people like.
Oh, I still love that there's this underlying theme that comes through, is that sense of humour with you blokes. And Sammy was talking about before that you were thinking about releasing sheep in before one game, and each mini team had to chase sheep around the field, and last one to get their sheep back in the team room had to do something stupid. But it's just, as much as that sounds like a silly off the wall sort of thing, it's actually building connections, isn't it? Like, and it's actually creating an environment of laughter and fun. And that's what you it's part of what you want a Saints man to be, to actually enjoy what you're doing and enjoy turning up. It's a big part of it, right?
Yeah, massively. Yeah. I think as well, so certainly from my experience, and I'd be interested to know if it is the same when you've obviously played in different clubs, there's the team that's playing most weeks, and then there's the team that's training and pushing those levels and driving it.
Yep.
And there's been times where never those two will meet really, unless there's injury or other bits and pieces. And so the mini team thing, where everyone goes into different teams, regardless of age, experience, caps, anything.
Yep.
They're in their own little team, and they socialize in those teams anyway. So that might be going out for a meal together. It might be competing as five-a-side. It might be doing all these different things. But one, we're practicing competing, and two, we're actually creating bonds between players that don't always spend a lot of time together.
Yep.
And so we have, and then it becomes tradition. So we always have, Rob Horn had said that when he was at the Waratahs, I think, they'd had a staff relay. And so every time we play Leicester away is the staff relay, and they do a pick. There's like a big draft.
Yes.
And so you're the last pick and all this. And then they video it, and they just basically abuse us for being old and fat. And so that's always Leicester away is staff relay. Newcastle is always an eating challenge for Trev Davison. There's always, that's the thing. Every year, Newcastle away is this. Every Christmas, there's a Christmas plate. There's all these sorts of things, and it becomes tradition. And actually, what I'm saying to lads is, don't ever stop competing. Like, it might be a build a cup challenge or build a Lego thing as quickly as you can, but I want you to try and win it.
Yep.
Because you're practicing competing as well. Now, we all take the mick, and there's some ridiculous games come out, like some mental games. And luckily nobody's been hurt yet. But, when the golf's on, we might have a golf competition. When the tennis is on, we might do something tennis-wise. And I think it just keeps it a bit fresher. It keeps those boys interacting with different groups.
Yeah.
And those mini teams have sort of stuck with it, because sometimes it can be a bit forced, but I think we try and make it a good laugh, and we try and make sure that the boys are competing and enjoying it as well.
It is important, isn't it? When for those that don't know, those sort of the lengthy 30+ seasons, it does become a grind. As much as you love the sport, it's tough, isn't it? Like, it's the same old stuff. It's physical. It's wet and cold, and you just got to get through it. So those little events are like the little beacons of light, aren't they? That just keep it, giving you enough to just keep you going, to keep you that level of enjoyment up, that keeps you turning up to go the next day, right?
And making sure you feel part of the group, and that you have a role to play. And we talk about, I say it all the time to the lads, everyone has a role to play. It might not be the role you want at the moment. You might not want to be the guy who drives the train level because you're not playing again, but your role is integral. And that's why, I try and make a huge, I don't try, I do, because I respect it and I value it hugely. It's the guys who don't play are the guys that I would really try and rally around. If you're playing every week and you're playing well and you're enjoying yourself, then, life is good. If you're not playing every week and you're not achieving what you set out to achieve, and you're not happy about where you are, you're the person that actually drives the training level. You know,
Mm.
you're the person who's actually and so the two guys that I always picked out the year who won the league was Joel Matavesi and Tom Cruise, because they didn't play a lot of rugby, but the impact they had playing and training and pushing and being unbelievably positive in the environment was huge. And that invariably had an impact. That was their role to play.
Yep.
It wasn't the role they wanted. Tom Cruise wanted to play games. Jolie Matt wanted to play games, but at that time they weren't selected and they went for it. And I'd have tremendous respect for that. And a lot of people wouldn't see that from the outside, but in 10 years' time and 20 years' time, when we meet up or have reunions or whatever, people will know. And I think value in that.
That's a character trait, is what you talked about earlier, isn't it? That's what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good, very good man.
Yeah. I always remember a great, and you won't mind me saying this, Jason Spice, wasn't getting picked for a long time. He's like not playing, and he was a bit dark and sour at the start. And then he confided in me one day that he said to himself, he sat down and he worked out what his daily rate was, like pay rate. And then he goes,
Yeah.
this is what I'm getting paid per day to hold a tackle bag at training.
Yeah.
He goes, geez, I better be a bloody good tackle bag holder.
Yeah.
And he took that approach to it. And I just thought it was a lovely shift of mindset, just to actually be grateful for where you are, what you're doing, and just go, actually, if I'm going to be in this role, let's be the goddamn best I am at this role. And and he said as soon as he started doing that, then he actually started getting more leeway and get picked more. And, and then it opened up the other way, because it was just leaving such a good mark on the coaches.
Yeah. And they talk about, I mentioned perspective earlier, and also the gratitude, like you said there, of actually running around and messing about with the lads, playing rugby. It sometimes does grind you down. It's monotony of the season, but like you said, you have to have some step away and take some perspective of what else you could be doing, and what else you could be. So, yeah, fair play to Spicer.
Yeah. And yourself, have you ever had any failures, mistakes that have helped shape the way you lead?
And nothing but failures.
Oh, come on, mate. Far out.
From one failure to the next. Yeah, no, the most disappointing things is when you don't see it coming. So I had a player knock on my door late on in the season, and like really good player, really good man, loved him. I still do. He's a great lad. And he said, I want to leave. I'm triggering my break clause, and I'll sign somewhere else. And it honestly was a thunderbolt, because I was like, I just didn't see it coming. And he basically just said, I just feel like I've not been spoken to. I've not valued in the environment. Don't feel like I'm getting what I need, etc., etc., etc. And it was just a bit like, oof. That was a bit of a shocker to me, that I'd obviously, just because he was playing regularly, he's playing really well, super well as well. Was one of the best players and a real leader in our environment. And I just thought, hey, he's in a great space. Like I said before, I'll go and make sure these other lads who aren't getting what they need get what they need. And it was a massive oversight. And it was something I then had in my office. I had a picture put up of every single player within the squad, with a little space, like a whiteboard, effectively, with their face on, printed by a local printer. And I would have notes next to them, in terms of when he's back from injury or how many games he's played. And I'd look at that board sometimes on a Monday and just make sure I haven't touched base with him. You can't have 10 minutes each week with all of them, because that's 600 minutes. 6,000 minutes. It's just too much. You can't spend individual time with all of them, but you have to make sure that these guys are still feeling part of the group, regardless of what they're doing, whether they're top of the tree or they're coming through the academy. And so I try occasionally just to make sure I look at that board and go, actually, I haven't spoken to James Rand for ages. I haven't sat down with him. He's been injured. He's just got engaged. I need to go and sit down with him and just have a yarn with him and make sure that he still feels part of the group. Or guys going out on loan, tough gig, man. They want to play for Northampton, and you turn up Tuesday, Thursday nights at Bedford, at Cambridge, at Rugby Lions, at Leicester Lions, sorry. So you just got to make sure you keep those guys involved, because I got burnt so badly with it, and I really regret not seeing that sooner. And it was just such a shock. It was blindsided me. So I was disappointed in myself on that one.
Well, I love the I love the bounce back from that, is like actually make sure it doesn't happen again by going to a printer and designing something to ensure that you had something in front of your face which you couldn't miss, right? So then it was staring you flat in the face, in front of mind, couldn't miss it. Love that.
But you get distracted by so many other things, and then you've spent 3 weeks and you haven't taken the time just to ask how players getting on, and that was poor from me from my management point of view. But I'm sure a lot of the players are probably thinking, "I'd wish Dowson would leave me alone and not talk to me." But
Shut up,
that,
coach. Stop
that's
telling me how
part
to
and
kick.
parcel. Yeah.
Mate, what is the differences like from coaching to director of rugby at Saints? What does it look like in your environment? The difference.
That means you know Sam. You play with Sam, and you've obviously coached with him. He's head coach, and he looks after everything that goes on the grass. Time we spent on the attacks, time we spent on defence, to what we're doing around the breakdown, how we coaching tackle technique. Obviously James Craig's in charge of all the line, and so you got to let the bakers bake. You got to give them. I give them as much runway as possible, and then what I would do is I'd watch everything, listen to everything, and I would pick holes in everything basically, and just challenge on everything that I possibly could. And sometimes Sam would say, "Yeah, I think that's valid, but I've done it for this reason." And sometimes he'd say, "You're a forward, shut up." But he's happy to say that, and I'm happy to take that and go, well, okay. So I would try and push hard on what I'm seeing in games, what I'm seeing in training, what I'm seeing from individuals, and sometimes they pick that up, sometimes they don't, and that's absolutely fine as well. And then everything else is just you're just dipping into all sorts of different stuff. A lot of the time it's on recruitment, the media, managing up to the CEO and the board and presenting to them, making sure that the staff are feeling part of that group as well, making sure that's running smoothly, the scheduling, how we travel to and from training, how we messaging during games, is all this sort of stuff that I just want to take away from the coaches because they want to be on the grass doing that. So I basically feel like I dip into loads of different things and have a real good oversight of the whole overarching business, whether it's community, the corporate, all this sort of stuff, but don't have a remit on anything. When you're a line-out coach, which is what I did before, percentage-wise where you are in the league.
Yeah.
Did you win line-outs? Did you defend more? What do you need to work on? And it's really accurate. And I have a really good relationship with Alex Coles and the other line-out callers, and we can share that. You then take a step back from a management point of view, and I don't see Colesy as much, and that's relationship slightly changes, and you're also making decisions on selection. So then that relationship slightly changes. And so you just take a step back from that face-to-face immediate feedback. And you get into a management role effectively. But I enjoy that variety, and I enjoy, sitting in meetings with the PRL around how the fixture list has worked, all those sorts of things, the referees, all those bits and pieces. I try and make sure that all the players have to worry about is playing, all the coaches are coaching, and everything else. Everything else works along in the background, along with the team manager and our head of recruitment and retention, and make sure we're getting the right people in through the door, really.
Mate, I love it, and certainly, mate, I just love that the broad scope of that is actually outstanding. Like the jack of all trades is kind of what it is,
Yeah.
and just ensuring that those that are doing their job are doing it as best they can.
Yeah, and they've got what they need, really. But I think the problem with that is then you feel that you're actually jack of all trades, and am I actually doing anything? Am I being effective with my time? What should I be doing at this period of time, and how should I influence our scrum defense, and what do we think about? And so sometimes it does become a little bit like, what are you being measured on in terms of this, that, and the other? But as long as we're getting what we need from an environment point of view, from a coaching point of view, and from a recruitment point of view, then you just got to keep those wheels spinning, I think.
Yeah, that's
And that was something Boydie. The best thing about it was that the transition from Boydie to me was utterly amicable. I wasn't parachuted into a new environment. Like you said, I had the whole history. I knew the playing group. I knew all the staff. Boydie gave me tons and tons of advice around what it was to be a DOR as opposed to a coach. And so that transition was relatively smooth. There's still some bumps in the road. I just mentioned one before, but, very fortunate. It's not like you've just been, like you see the football managers, Sean Dyche going into Nottingham Forest today. He's got know the playing group. He doesn't know the history. He doesn't know all those sorts of elements. And so I think, I was very fortunate that was an evolution rather than being dropped in.
Yeah, mate, I think in history would back that up too. Even like the examples of Scott Robinson with the Crusaders, he came in 7 in a row, but but often what's not seen is he had all that runway beforehand where he played for the team for a long time, coached every division through the age group all the way, so he knew how everything worked, knew the bits where he had to come and go, that needs to change, and they were all right because he had that history. Similar to what you have and that knowledge, and people looked up to him because he knew the environment and was able to make the right changes at the right time. It is fascinating what you say about it's hard to measure though, right? Like it's not like a line-out coach. You haven't got that, stat to say this is where you are. It's you could be doing everything right, but the team's coming mid-table, and geez, am I doing everything right? Who knows? Yeah. So that's that. And that's where that feedback, and just for your own insight, mate, is people when I talk to the coaches and things about you, the feedback is always, mate, doing tops. And that's what you want. You want the people that are under your tutelage and care, you want them to be your biggest cheerleaders. And certainly when I talk to players and coaches about yourself, it comes back in spades, mate, that what you're doing is bang on at that club. And I reckon it's a joy to see. And the way they play too, as you said earlier, any organisation is a representation of its figurehead. And that's you, mate, with the way they play.
That's very kind. Thank you, man.
Mate, Phil, last question. It's been about an hour, mate. We'd like to keep it to an hour so you can get back to doing all those chores you've got scheduled on your day off. And the question is this, mate, what's one belief about culture that you believe in that you reckon your peers would disagree with?
The only again, this was a question that you sent me, and I thought about it a lot, and I thought around the culture doesn't necessarily have to be healthy. Doesn't necessarily have to be healthy to be effective. And by healthy, I mean conforming to societal norms. I played at a club which was, for that period of time was relatively successful, and it had like a mob mentality, and if you weren't with it, you're against it. And there's some players who literally got spat out of the back, and I'm sure I think it's more of a older generation sort of thing, but who didn't survive it, and went on to do different things. And from a modern society point of view, where everyone needs to be valued, everyone needs to be heard, it just wasn't seen as that, and it was like either you're in or you're out, and if you're out, you're a long way out, and we're going this way, and it was. And I don't think, and I think that's fairly obvious, but I also think it's something that to be mindful of is that it doesn't have to be pretty to be effective. There's loads of different ways of doing it. Obviously, so many different ways, and that's why I love going into different environments, and that's why I see guys get jobs in the England under-20s or in the England environment who then get to go and visit all these clubs. I would love to go around and do that. I'd love to go around NHL teams and see how they deal with that, and they play so many games. It's such a physical sport. I'd love to see what that looked like. Because there's so many different ways of doing it, and that's why, again, why your subject matter is so rich, is because there's no one way to define it.
I do agree with you, mate, on that one. That I think it can be messy. Any like you look at some of the best and most enjoyable family time moments. It's not the moments when you're all sitting around having a nice dinner at a restaurant. It's some of those messy times where there's yelling, and that's a bit I miss. Like in my own household when we got 4 kids, and when sort of they're gone, away on camps and things, and you just miss the sort of like the shit on the floor and like all the toys. It just seems like no one's living in this house. We've got this massive house and just feels empty and hollow and not quite whole. And then when they come back, you actually embrace it. You go, yeah, this is what we're talking about. Look at all the shit on the floor. Like, who's left their undies here and all this stuff? And that's the joy of it. And then it becomes from those chaotic moments, that's when you find out all these sort of funny bits, and you can start hassling and a bit of banter about someone always doing this thing, and you create these quirks. And it doesn't have to be this perfect thing that's feel good all the time. You got to make it what it is for you, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Love it. Mate, that is our podcast, mate, and I'd like to finish off, if I may, with my 3 kind of takeaways that I got from this conversation with you. So number 1, mate, was this phrasing that coming from your mentor and one of the first guys that helped elevate you into your coaching and your journey at Northampton Saints was Chris Boyd, is you can't expect to learn new things if you don't let people in. And I love that. You said you can't operate in a vacuum. You've got to reach out, try new people, bring them into the environment and see what they say, see what they do, see what they feel about you. Ask yourself, what do we need? What are we missing? And bringing those people in to just give that different perspective. And I think it's a big one in any team you're coaching, is to not stay in a little vacuum, not to stay in your own orbit, but to expand and see what else is out there. Number 2, I love this phrase, any organisation is a representation of its figurehead. And I think as much as we wouldn't always want that as a mother and father, that your children are representations of you and your attitudes and your beliefs, there is a massive degree of truth to that, and even more so in a rugby team. And the way you do things is the way that the people underneath you, your players particularly, are probably going to do things as well. So everything you do is being watched, even the unseen things. And I think that's a really important concept to remember as a coach. Number 3, and this is probably one of my favorite points that people have made on this podcast, or a person has made, is a sense of humour goes a long way. And I think that is absolutely massive. And we don't say it enough, that comedy and laughter is such a joyous thing, and it welcomes connection. And you made the point about your wife making a real human and life statement about no one died today when she works at the hospital, and that puts it in perspective. So when we're talking about lineouts and rucks and those sort of things, to also remember to laugh along the way and play the games with sheep and getting them back into the team room quick is actually something which keeps us turning up, keeps us enjoying what we do, and keeps us a little bit grateful for the fact that we get to play a game for a living. Phil Dowson, what a pleasure it is to have you mid-season, and a very successful one so far, from the Northampton Saints, chatting on the Coaching Culture podcast.
Thank you very much, Ben. Thank you.